Two prominent wealthy doctors, one dead, one in jail, all behind a woman. Let's get into this story. Dr. Joseph Sonnier worked hard to earn the career he had. He was able to obtain his bachelor's degree from Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge back in 1976, and then went on to receive his medical degree from the Louisiana State University School of Medicine in Shreveport. He then relocated to Dallas, Texas, where he was chosen for residency in pathology at Parkland Hospital. In his final year of residency, he was made chief resident. Once he was done with his studies, he went on to partner with DPA Laboratories, which he sold to Ameripath, a pathology company that provides diagnostic services such as analyzing and interpreting medical exams like tissue samples and biopsies. He continued to work with Ameripath as medical director and chief pathologist for Covenant Health System in Lubbock, Texas, where he lived. Joseph had two loving sons, Joseph A. Sonnier IV, who also went by the name of Dallas, and James Sonnier, with his ex-wife, Becky Gallegos, who divorced him after 27 years of marriage, but then tragically lost her life on July 12, 2010, when her new husband shot her before turning the weapon on himself and ending his own life, leaving Dr. Sonnier a single dad to his boys, to which by all accounts, he was an amazing father. But not only was he an amazing dad, he was a great brother to his siblings, as well as a dependable mentor for the younger pathologists who worked for him at the hospital. Joseph was known to be a high-profile, prestigious doctor and multimillionaire who loved to travel the world. He had a six-figure wine collection, made his own cologne, and he was a fantastic dancer as well. With Joseph being a single man in his upper 40s, he decided to get back into the dating scene and took up dance classes on a whim. At his dance classes, he met beautiful women who were equally yoked with him and went on a couple dates. One of the women he met was Rochelle Shatina, a gorgeous, divorced, tall, blonde, single mom of 4 boys. They met in September 2011 during a ballroom dance class and clicked instantly. Joseph's sons knew that he liked her for sure because for the first date, he brought her to a Texas Tech football game that was a tradition for them to go to with their father every fall, usually just them. And his sons are self-proclaimed tough critics, but they knew that they liked her because just based on how well she carried herself around them. And things got pretty serious between Joseph and Rochelle, as he had soon introduced Rochelle to his grandchildren. And although they were becoming closer to each other, according to Joseph's sons, he wasn't necessarily trying to marry her. He was just enjoying the time that they spent together. But Rochelle, on the other hand, wanted something more solid. Maybe not marriage, according to what she said herself, but definitely some exclusivity. Either way, Joseph treated Rochelle the way any woman wants to be treated, with love, respect, and romance. He treated Rochelle to a trip to Paris for her 50th birthday. They visited the Pont des Arts Bridge, where Joseph wrote he and Rochelle's name on a lock and put the lock on the bridge, tossing the key into the Seine River as a symbol of everlasting love for the two. However, just weeks after this, their love would be disrupted and broken, as 57-year-old Joseph Sonnier had been found deceased at his Lubbock, Texas home on July 10, 2012, literally 2 years after his ex-wife's tragic death. You see, when Joseph hadn't shown up to work and no one was able to reach him, his co-worker showed up to his home to check on him. Upon entering the home is where it was discovered a broken back window and Joseph's body. He had been shot 5 times and then stabbed 11 times. A woman on the scene is the one who called 911 frantically to report Joseph's death. Now, of course, naturally, investigators zero in on Rochelle first, since she was the lover of Joseph when he passed. When interviewing her, they asked her the regular questions: how did you know Joseph? How long were y'all together? Yada, yada. But during the interview process, Rochelle tells them that she had been feeling like someone had been watching her and following her around everywhere she went. She even recalled how she saw a man spying on her at the gym in October of 2011, and another incident where a man was watching both her and Joseph one evening after dance class while they were in his backyard. And the man had even taken photos of them because they saw the flash of the camera go off. But she said they just laughed it off and didn't think much of it. They made jokes like, oh, somebody must be following us, but they shrugged it off. She also mentions how Joseph had been getting strange texts from a mysterious person calling him demeaning names, and she had gotten a handwritten letter from a woman named Tina telling her how she and Joseph had an explicit relationship, with her giving Joseph intimacy in exchange for money. So now at this point, Rochelle is basically telling investigators like maybe it could be a scorned lover from his past who could have done this to him. But the investigators shift the focus on to her, and they ask her, like, well, what about you? Do you have any scorned lovers from your past? And that's when she blurts out a name real quick, Dr. Michael Thomas Dixon. So Rochelle was dating Michael Dixon, who was also prestigious in his own right as a plastic surgeon in Amarillo, Texas. He had been recognizable from his billboard advertisements and commercials. He too was very wealthy, and he was married at the time of them two meeting. The two of them met in 2010 when Rochelle went to visit him to receive Botox injections. Rochelle said initially he was a nice guy, he was funny, he was witty, so they got to know each other more and they began dating. But after about a year and a half, Rochelle felt like Michael wasn't very emotionally supportive, and she described the relationship as volatile. Not in a violent way, but she described him as mean-spirited. So she broke up with him and she moved on. Rochelle said Michael definitely knew who Joseph was because he would address Joseph by name whenever he would text her, asking to take her out on dates. And in these texts of date offers, she would decline every time. He would also ask her, hey, let's get back together, but she just wasn't interested. So with this information from Rochelle, detectives decide it's time to go speak with Dr. Michael Dixon. But when they do get there, they decide to secretly record their conversation with him. So during the conversation, Michael says he knows nothing about Joseph, which clearly is a lie, being that Rochelle already told the detectives he knew very well about who Joseph was. But one thing Michael was honest about was his love for Rochelle. He said he loved her deeply, so much that he changed his life around for her, and he only was looking forward to being with her because she hit him up one day and was like, hey, let's work this thing out. Let's plan a trip and let's figure out what direction we'll go in. But shortly after that conversation, Michael says he hits up Rochelle one day, and that's when she tells him that she's in love with her dance partner, of course, that being Joseph. Michael wasn't happy about it at all. He even sent Rochelle texts saying how, he sold his family down the river and got divorced just so he could be with her. That's how much he loved her. And no, that saying doesn't literally mean he sold his family, in case anybody's listening to this and thinks that. It just means that he left his wife to be with his mistress. Michael was very bitter about their breakup. Detectives asked Michael about his whereabouts the day Joseph's life had been taken, and Michael was able to provide an alibi. In fact, everybody was able to provide an alibi. Michael, Rochelle, and the ex-girlfriends of Joseph. So at this point, detectives are stumped. They're unsure of how they're going to find out who did this to Joseph. Until one day, they get a phone call from a tipster. The tipster said they had a roommate, and the roommate was a man named David Shepard. And that David told him how he was the one who took Joseph's life because of a love triangle that Michael was bitter about, and that Michael paid David in 3 100-ounce silver bars that was worth $9,000 and a box of expensive Cuban cigars. I guess the guilt was eating at David because, according to the roommate, David tried to take his own life just 2 days after Joseph's body was found. So shortly after this bomb dropped on the detectives' heads, in July 2012, they went and arrested both Michael and David, and they were both facing first-degree homicide charges with a $10 million bond. The charges at the time had the potential of being upgraded to capital homicide, which in the state of Texas carries a penalty of either the death penalty or life without parole. David ended up pleading guilty to his charges and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 2014, a jury deadlocked during Michael's capital homicide trial, which ended in a mistrial. And in September of 2015, Michael bonded out of jail after an $8 million reduction from the original $10 million bond, to which he was able to pay $200,000 in cash as a partial security of the remaining $2 million. A second trial was set in place, and in November 2015, Dr. Michael Thomas Dixon was unanimously found guilty on 2 counts of capital homicide and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During this trial, it was learned that Michael did have David stalk Joseph to keep tabs on his every move before taking his life. But in December of 2018, the capital homicide charges had been overturned by the jury on an appeal. However, still keeping the life sentence without parole. My condolences go out to Dr. Joseph Sonnier's sons. They lost not one but 2 parents at the hands of unhinged men who couldn't handle rejection. Many blessings to Dr. Joseph's grandchildren, who will probably have to learn one day of the horrific way they lost their grandparents before they were ever even old enough to understand the meaning of life itself. Rest in peace, Dr. Joseph Sonnier. May your spirit live on with your loved ones forever.